our next Beam chat with Jennifer Kabaker from Digital Promise. I'm Natasha Rodriguez. I am a student social impact industry associate here at Stanford Beam. And today we also have a student with us.
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm a student ambassador here at Beam.
Great. And undecided on major?
Yeah, undecided.
Great. We take everyone here. It's great. Yeah, and so we have Jennifer here, who is a alum. She was a bachelor's degree, got a bachelor's degree here, but also was a co-term in the PULSE program education. So Jennifer, if you could tell us a little bit about what your trajectory is like since Stanford and how you got to Digital Promise.
Sure, absolutely. So as Natasha said before, I graduated in 2006 with both my bachelor's and my master's. So my bachelor's was in public policy with a focus in education, and then I also simultaneously in my senior year, which is a whole other line of questioning that I'm happy to answer, like, am I crazy to try to do a master's in my senior year? Probably yes. In the policy organization and leadership studies program at the Stanford School of Education. So clearly education policy is a common thread throughout all of that. Since then, so right after graduation, I moved to DC and lived there for 6 years, working in education policy, first starting in sort of education policy research at an organization called the Urban Institute, which is sort of a large traditional research organization, and then working at the New America Foundation, which is now actually just called New America, which is like a more think tank type organization where I did a lot of writing and research about education budget policy and policy in general, and how sort of things that happen in Congress trickle down and what they mean on the ground for schools and districts and states. And then from there, I moved to Los Angeles, where I worked for KIPP LA Schools, which is one of the KIPP Charter School Network programs based in Los Angeles specifically. And there I did a bunch of things, starting off in development and grant writing to support the schools, and then moving into a greater focus on external engagement and partnership, particularly around blended learning or instructional technology in the schools, and helping to sort of spread the good work that KIPP LA was doing and create a greater conversation around that work in the city of Los Angeles as a whole. And then since 2014, I've been working for Digital Promise, which is an education nonprofit, actually, that happens to function a lot like a startup, because we are based in Silicon Valley and we're a small organization that's really involved in the ed tech space. So we have a lot of different initiatives at Digital Promise, all focusing on increasing the opportunity to learn for Americans through the powerful use of technology. So the theory there being that there are pockets of excellence in education across the country and throughout the world, actually. And then through technology, we can hopefully increase access to that excellence for more students. For my work specifically, I'm the director of the Educator Microcredentials Initiative, which is essentially a program where we are trying to build a system to provide educators with formal recognition for their learning that's competency-based. So instead of focusing on the time that educators spend learning, instead looking at, can those educators take that learning and apply it in their classrooms?
That's great. Actually, before we go on, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on nonprofit versus startup. Did you ever consider working at a startup, and why would you choose a nonprofit instead?
So I definitely considered working at a startup. You know, they are typically for-profit organizations, so that changes things a lot. So you see, obviously, in the for-profit space, more of a focus on sales and dissemination and things like that. In the nonprofit space, it's a lot of sort of grant writing and foundation management and funder relationship management, which is something that I've done a fair amount of. And those both come with their challenges and their opportunities. So I think it's really about, when you think about those decisions, sort of where your priorities are. So are you interested in something that you know, could have a tremendous impact, but has sort of all of those for-profit trappings around it? The nice thing about for-profits is you tend to get things like catered lunches and lots of swag. Or do you want to work in a nonprofit that typically has more of a socially focused mission? So we talk about, like, we're always constantly trying to change the world. And by not having to think about profits and investors and things like that, we can do that in a more flexible way, I guess.
Great. And so how did you initially hear about Digital Promise?
Oh, that's a great question. So when I was at KIPP LA Schools, my executive director there was actually in a fellowship program with the president and CEO of Digital Promise here. And so though I'd come across Digital Promise's website a couple times, I wasn't really sure because it's a pretty new organization. It's only been around since 2011. And so when I started to dig in, after learning more about it from the executive director at KIPP LA, I got really excited because I'd also just moved from Los Angeles to San Francisco. So I was looking for opportunities in the Bay Area as well.
What was it that you liked about Digital Promise when you were hearing about it?
So there's a lot of different pieces. So one of them, of course, is the mission of the organization, and specifically the mission of the Microcredentials Initiative. So I have spent a lot of time in my career thinking about empowering educators and more effectively supporting them. So that's a big piece of Microcredentials, and that really spoke to me. But beyond that, it's an organization full of both, I say, inspiring and inspired people. So the people here are both sort of very accomplished and very intelligent and work well together and are great collaborators and creative thinkers. So they're inspiring, but they're also inspired. So these are people who are really deeply dedicated to their work and are really engaged in helping to achieve these demonstrable, meaningful, measurable results in education.
Very awesome. And as the director of Educator Microcredentials, what does your everyday look like? Is there an everyday schedule that you have?
No, there's not at all. So I would say I spend a lot of time on the phone talking to partners. So those could be people who don't know anything about what we do and we're trying to sort of sell them and get them excited about the idea. That could be longtime partners who were working on strategy and thinking big and planning for the future. It could be thinking about the actual things that we need to get done. So because we are primarily grant funded, we have a lot of deliverables that need to happen. So we have a technology platform that makes all the microcredentials available. We have content partners to develop the microcredentials themselves. We have district, state, and school partners where they're actually using the microcredentials. So it's sort of keeping my hands in all of those different things. And then I also have a staff of 3 that I manage. And so it's a lot of talking with them, using their expertise, figuring out what they're good at and what they want to do and giving them the space to do that. So it's a lot of things. And then there's also writing and a million emails, and every once in a while I get to do things like webinars. So earlier today I led a webinar with iNicole, which is an international education technology organization, basically, to tell people about microcredentials.
We couldn't hear you for a second there. Sorry, if you could just repeat that. Yeah.
Oh, sure. So one of the things that I get to do is more external facing. So earlier today, I led a webinar with an international organization on education technology, telling people about microcredentials, or sometimes I get to write articles for publications, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of moving pieces.
Interesting. So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of moving pieces. Could you tell us a little bit about the different areas of Digital Promise? Like, are there different branches or teams?
Yeah, so we typically call them different initiatives. So in addition to the Educator Microcredentials Initiative, there's an initiative called the League of Innovative Schools, which is a coalition of 73 school districts across the country. And the goal there is to really support the district leaders in encouraging and increasing the powerful use of technology in their schools. We have the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools Initiative, which is a implementation of tablets in middle schools across the country. I think they're in 21 schools now. And so they embed, I just got the thumbs up that I was right. They embed coaches and storytellers in schools that are implementing these tablets to ensure that having the tablets in the classrooms means more than just giving kids a new tablet to play with, but really impacts instruction and the way we think about teaching and learning. We have a Research at Work initiative that's all about how we can use research to help improve the design of education technology tools, to help schools make better decisions and to increase sort of the richness of the conversation around technology and education. We have an adult education initiative, which of course focuses on improving the quality of adult education. So education programs for low-skilled adults typically, through powerful tools like technology. And then we also have an operations group and a communications group, and of course an executive group to support all of the work that we do. Oh, and actually, there's a few other things that we have going on. One of them explicitly focused on maker spaces. One of them focused on encouraging sort of communities of innovation around education. So we've got a lot going on, and then we also have a global initiative that is focused on sort of doing similar work that Digital Promise is doing, but on a global scale. And then part of that work is also thinking about this new idea called sort of learning positioning systems or learner pathway systems, or we're still trying to figure out the name, but thinking about how we can think more comprehensively about individual students and what their different learning needs and goals are.
Okay. And what would you say are some of the most exciting parts of being in your area in the micro-credential initiatives?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. So one of the big ones for me is that we're at sort of this inflection point in talking about educator professional development. So we know that we spend a lot of money in this country on educator professional development. There's a study that came out about a year ago that estimated $18 billion with a B, so billion dollars, which is a lot of money. And that research shows that most of that money is not well spent, and that teachers aren't really finding a lot of benefit to that professional learning. So I think we're finally at that point where we can take that momentum and turn it into innovation and new ideas and really shift the way we think about the system. And so there's sort of two ways that micro-credentials address that. One that I mentioned briefly before, which is shifting the way we think about how educators learn from just the time they spend learning to if they can take that learning in the classroom. So we refer to it as competency-based learning. And then the other is sort of validating and recognizing educators for the learning they do regardless of where it happens. So it's not just the like teacher in-service day, you know, like when school's closed for half a day and all the teachers sit in a room together, but also thinking about teachers who engage in Twitter and YouTube and take MOOCs and have mentors and coaches and things like that, and really shining a light on that learning as well for educators.
So with all those parts, what are like the top skills that you think you use day to day? Like what, as director, it sounds like you're pulled in different directions in lots of exciting areas. But what exactly involved like being able to do?
Sure. So one of the big ones is communication. So as I said, I'm on the phone a lot. I write a lot of emails. I write a lot of sort of, grant reports and things like that. So the communication skills are really important, writing as well as in person, and really thinking about being thoughtful about that communication and tailoring it to your audience. So there are some partners that are really formal, and so I become really formal in the communications with them. There are some that are more like friends, and so I use more of a friend tone with them. So that's a big one. Another huge one is time management. So as I said, there's so much going on, and so you have to keep everything moving, and being really organized is really important. And then the other one I think is sort of this being able to think outside the box and solve problems creatively. So we get a lot of challenges that sort of happen on a dime. So we have to like shift what we're doing all of a sudden, or suddenly regroup and head in a totally different direction. And so being able to problem solve in real time is really important.
Yeah. So do you have any advice for any current students on how they might develop those skills now?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. So when I think about time management, one of the biggest things was getting involved in so many different things as a student and then being able to make it all happen. So I was in an a cappella group, which is a huge time investment. I was a dorm staff, so I was a focus assistant in one of the dorms. I was on the board of Kids with Dreams, which is one of the student groups that works with students with disabilities. And I was getting my bachelor's and my master's at the same time. So among all of those things, it really forced me to become efficient and to manage my time and to know what was important and what wasn't important, while also ensuring that I was having fun and taking advantage of everything that Stanford had to offer. So it's definitely not easy, but I think we should never underestimate the power of the things that you learn by being involved in extracurricular activities.
Yeah. And how about creativity? Like, is that something you kind of learned along the way? It sounds like you've worked in a lot of different environments. So
yeah, I think that's probably something that started for me in high school and college, because there were so many different things that I was doing and getting involved in. but also really became a necessity once I got out of college and into the working world, because you're constantly adapting to new environments and thinking about new things and trying to think big. And I think particularly in Silicon Valley, there's a focus on that sort of creative thinking and being dynamic and agile and all of that. So it's probably not, there's no like class you can take to learn it. That said, I often really recommend to people the improv class. I can't think of like what the course number is, but it definitely sort of forces you to go out of your comfort zone.
Interesting. So are there any skills that you don't think you had coming in that you, or things you wish you knew coming into your current job that like you know now?
That's a really good question. So I think one of the things that as Stanford students we're often really bad at is like knowing when to give up control, and when to delegate and when to sort of empower other people, because we're all so used to being like, I don't want to say the best at something, but like being in control, so like being super organized, making sure that like everything's done exactly how we want it. And one of the most important things I've learned is that building a really good team and empowering them and knowing when to like give up control and to let someone run with something is really, really important. I mean, that's definitely not something that's easy to learn in college, especially because so many of us had bad high school group work experiences. So you sort of take that damage with you into college and you like look at everyone suspiciously. You would have to do a group project like, who's not going to screw me? And so trusting that once you're in the working world, that's less of a challenge is big.
Yeah. Well, speaking of giving up power, I did want to see, do you have any questions jumping in? Like,
what do you think is one really weird skill, perhaps, like that you like have acquired that like, you think helps you specifically with your job right now? Like just something.
So honestly, this is going to sound strange, but writing emails I think is so important, and like knowing email etiquette. So like I think it makes a huge difference when you actually like say hi person's actual name, and then like include a greeting and really think about like what are the implications of the words you're using and how can you write an email that is compelling to someone, that's efficient and clear, but also sets the right tone for your relationship. And that I've seen people be really good at it and I've seen people be really bad at it, and you can really ruin relationships through bad emailing, in my opinion. And I always, think about people a lot in terms of how they communicate via email. So being a good emailer, I think, is really important. Another one is maintaining my calendar. Like if I did not have my Google Calendar, I do not know what I would do with my life. So being really diligent about keeping your calendar together, because it's also a tool for everyone else. So now like the people I work with all know, like if they need to find time with me, they can look on my calendar because what's there is real. That's a big one. And let me think if there's anything else. Oh, bringing lunch. So I think that one of the like most important things for me has been like bringing lunch from home. I'm not always that good at it, but I do think it's really important because it means that I'm like investing in myself in some way every day. It also saves money. That's a big one.
Yeah. So if there were any students who would want to work at Digital Prom as they were looking at that, what would the application process look like?
So we have jobs open almost all the time these days. We're growing really quickly. So on the digitalpromise.org website, along the top, I think it's under the About Us button, there's all of the career opportunities. So any student can go there and view all of the job descriptions and apply. I think it's all an email application. We'll also likely have some internships that are open for the summer, so people should keep an eye out for that. We are really a culture-focused organization, so making sure that people are agile, team players, collaborative. We have a yes and culture, so instead of always saying like, no, we can't do that, but blah, 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 you always say like, yes, that's a great idea. And there's this other thing. And so really looking for people who fit that culture and are looking to, work hard and really engage and be thoughtful is really who we look for.
Do you have any advice for someone going into the application process, like to make themselves pop out?
Stand out? I mean, for me, I actually read cover letters. So I think writing a good cover letter is really important, and actually thinking, what can a cover letter tell someone that they wouldn't get from reading my resume? Because that's really your opportunity for a person to get to know you initially and to really set the tone for your application. Um, I also think that making sure that the bullets on your resume are actually informative, so that they tell what you actually did and not, and use fewer buzzwords and jargon and things like that, but are actually informative to someone reading them is really helpful. Um, and then another thing is, like, if someone emails you about a job, respond. Like, don't let that email linger in your inbox, because that makes the person that reached out to you feel like you don't care about them, and that's never good.
Yeah. Jennifer, I wanted to ask, do you have any current openings that you wanted to put out there?
So let's see. In micro-credentials right now, we do have a couple openings, though it would likely be more for someone at the master's degree level than an undergrad, because we are looking for people with work experience. That said, we are looking for someone who could be an external communications lead, is what the position's called. So really looking there for someone who's a really good writer, who has a bit of a background in education, and who is just really excited about micro-credentials and writing about it and telling compelling stories. And then the other is a project manager, which is really to help keep all of the trains on the tracks and make sure that we're meeting our grant deadlines and goals and other things. So someone who's hyper organized and can put together a project plan and think really dynamically and on a dime. I'm sure we have several other positions that are open right now. I just don't know what they are off the top of my head.
That's fair. Yeah, and so if someone was interested in one of those positions, how long does the application process generally take? Like, should they start applying now to start a month from now, or a week, like 6 months from now?
It depends. I mean, typically we say we want to hire people as soon as possible, but I think the process probably takes 3 to 4 weeks at a minimum, because it's not like you have a phone call and they offer you a job. So it's usually a little more in depth than that. But I would say if people see things that appeal to them now, they should definitely apply.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking with us. And so
Absolutely.
we'll cut off the live broadcast now, and we can chat a little bit after.
Great. Thank you.